Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you. Featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your very best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Yesterday, I interviewed somebody who ran an organization called Guardianship. And now, it's very interesting because so many people are, across the country actually, are dealing with all kinds of situations where they are in trouble. Now, Matthew Cardinale is the founder of Smart Alec, an organization devoted to helping cities across the country implement progressive, environmentally friendly, affordable housing policies. And he has a lot to tell our audience. So I want to welcome Matthew Cardinale to the Susan Brender Show.
Oh, thank you so much. What a pleasure it is to be on the program.
Thank you. Now, Matthew, I think it's very important that our audience understand what Smart Alec stands for. Would you give them the definition of Smart Alec?
Sure. So it's actually State and Municipal Action for Results Today, Agenda for Legislative Empowerment and Collaboration. Yeah. Smart and then Alec. And our website is smartalec.org. And our logo is kind of this smiling house with solar panels on it. Huh. And how does a house smile? Well, if the windows are little eyes, and then the top of the door is like a little smiling mouth. But it's so, but the house is just so delighted to be affordable and, energy efficient.
Yeah, right. Now, as far as affordable housing policies, I'd like our audience to understand what's going on in this country with regard to that. Is there still a lot of affordable housing, or is it being taken away?
Well, there is really a affordable housing crisis in our country right now, and there is a unmet need in just about every major U.S. city for affordable housing, and particularly at the income brackets of families making $10,000 and less per year, $15,000 and less per year, or even the $15,000 to $25,000 per year. A lot of the new housing that's coming on is market rate housing, high amenity housing, that there are some people who can afford, and that's fine to offer them an option, but we are not producing enough new affordable units, and at the same time, as I think you're alluding to, we are losing from our affordable housing stocks in every city existing affordable housing, and those are coming offline in a variety of ways, some of which are public policy choices, and some of which are happening on the private market just by, rents going up. Right. But we also see things like policy choices, which are demolition approvals, land use changes, demolitions of public housing. We've seen a big retreat from public housing, and movement to private vouchers, which has resulted in a loss of many of those units which have been demolished and replaced with less affordable things. And just in general, we have retreated from the idea that housing is a public responsibility. And I like to say that, I like to say that homelessness is not a characteristic of an individual, but it's a characteristic of society. Yeah. Homelessness describes the way we've organized our society.
Okay, wait a minute. We're going to get to that in a moment, but before we get to that, I would like to know, why should the average person care about this affordable housing situation?
Well, the average person is affected by this. I mean, every person who is struggling with housing cost burden, which means that they're paying more than 30% of their income toward housing, or people who are homeless. And really, this intersects with so many other issues, because, just for example, there have been all kinds of struggles and fights across the country over wage increases, whether to increase wages. Mm-hmm. And, and we can increase wages a lot, but it's actually not helping anybody if all that money is going toward housing cost increases.
Yeah. Let me ask you this too. We're now in the process of having an election. Okay, it's coming up very, very soon, and we have two candidates. And I know that people have discussed this over and over about our candidates, and it's the Trump versus the Clinton thing. Now I can't help it. I have to ask you, who is better for this kind of issue? Is it Trump or is it Clinton? And why do you think that?
Well, we kind of need to start thinking about what we're going to be asking President Clinton to do for us on the federal level.
Oh, so you already have the answer to who's going to be the president?
I think we need to get ready for President Clinton. But of course, Jill Stein of the Green Party would have had probably the most robust solution that really embraces public solutions. And frankly, there's no better solution than one where the public owns the property. We're using land that we already own. We manage it ourselves. I mean, when you use a private voucher, you're just subsidizing some private property owner's profit and actually inflating housing costs. So someone like Jill Stein would say, we need a massive investment in public housing. And public housing has become such a bad word because we have visions of, high crime and high poverty and things like that. But that's not intrinsically how housing has to be if it's publicly owned, funded, and managed.
Yeah, but, wait a minute. Let's stop now for a moment. I really have to ask you, if you think that public housing is so important for a person who is really in trouble, and I think if you're making $15,000 or something below that, I mean, you really have a problem. Now, the situation that I see is that when you have all that public housing, like projects, I'm talking about the projects, you see more crime, and I don't know the statistics behind this, but tell us. I mean, how do you define public housing, and do you really feel that these huge buildings that kind of foster crime, isn't it true? I mean, they don't necessarily have to be done on such a large scale, and of course the movement is toward integrated and not segregated to one part of town, and not so much of a large size. It can be done in I think some of the ways that you're alluding to that produce better outcomes. But what I kind of, before we get too much into the weeds of housing policy, I kind of want to share with your readers what our organization is really about, which is producing model legislation for affordable housing and the environment, really in response to another organization called ALEC, which is the American Legislative Exchange Council, which has been very effective at doing the same thing for state legislatures. They have been, for many years, taking corporate money, Koch brothers money, and producing these model bills for things like voter ID, anti-regulation, privatization of schools, privatization of prisons. They have a very comprehensive agenda and literally hundreds of these bills. And they get really passed by Republicans every year. And so, what we are saying is, it's not enough to just critique that. We have to offer an alternative. And the alternative that we're offering is not only substantive, it's not only like, we have a different vision of what types of policies to pursue, but we also have a different vision of democracy. And that is inclusive, participatory, transparent, grassroots. And what does that mean? Well, our board of directors
has approved bylaws that require participation of at least 1/3 low-income people in everything that we do.
Right.
We have mandates for transparency. And this is so crucial to us because we feel like that is kind of the missing piece from this progressive social change work, because there's no shortage of good ideas. Cities are pursuing things, all over the country that deserve to be studied and emulated. What's missing is the capacity of ordinary people, low-income people, marginalized people, homeless people, to make those demands in an organized fashion, and that shows large numbers, because that's really what legislators respond to.
Okay, now, Matthew, hold on a moment.
Of course.
When you talk about homeless and building different shelters or different kinds of buildings for the homeless, many of the states, many of the cities, there are people in those cities who don't want it in their neighborhood. They don't want it in their neighborhood. So how do you get around that?
Everybody kind of is going to have to do their fair share in terms of having affordable housing in their community, for example. And it's interesting you mentioned this, because President Obama actually issued some kind of a statement. I don't know if it was an op-ed or he wrote something this week talking about how zoning decisions in cities and counties are actually holding back affordable housing. And it's kind of the thing that you're talking about. Just like people don't want shelters in their backyard, often they say we don't want affordable housing in our backyard. And the result of that, you see, is they all end up in one part of town. So you're back to the concentration of poverty. So everybody really has to do their part if we're really serious about integration and mixed income communities and healthy communities. There's no reason why there's no reason why people should really be afraid of affordable housing, because what we're really talking about is the people who are working service sector jobs. I mean, if you're making $10,000-$15,000 a year, you might be working at Starbucks. You might be working at Target. You might be working, at many of the establishments where people, go get their coffee and go buy what they need. So I just feel like if people are good enough to ring up your latte, they also are good enough to live in your community. And the people, who work in your community should have an opportunity to live in the community.
I agree with you in many ways, but I have to, there's nothing to disagree with, because everybody deserves to have a roof over their head, and they deserve to live in a neighborhood where there's safety, where there are a lot of police just going around and making sure that, there's no drugs being sold and various things like that. But here it is. I want you to give our audience an understanding of what an intentional community would look like for you. How, do you see, explain. I mean, I have a feeling that you understand, if you were an architect, if you were a contractor, how you would make it look. I want you to kind of think about that for a second, and then tell our audience, give our audience an idea of what a really good community would look like.
Wow. Well, it would be, it would definitely be a mixed income, high amenity community. It would have access to transportation, public transportation options, pedestrian friendly, bicycle, all that. It would have access to social services, and the various things that people need, health services, medical services, all that would be close, grocery stores. But this isn't like I mean, this isn't some amazing answer. This is what everybody wants in their community, I think. And the gentrification that we're seeing is so insidious because people want grocery stores. They want, nice street lights and sidewalks, but the second that those improvements start to come in and the property values go up, and then now you can't rent in the neighborhood. That is a completely perverse kind of situation. And so we have to be intentional through public policy about how we ensure that some of those units are affordable. And so there are ways to require that. Cities are using something called inclusionary zoning,
define that for our audience.
Sure. Inclusionary zoning is something where there's a requirement for the inclusion of affordable units in any new development. And so, for example, we might say a new apartment building, any apartment building that has more than 20 units, 10% of those have to be affordable at this particular price point. And what they often do in return is give incentives to the developer, so they get more height, they get more density, they get something that allows them to kind of make up whatever they're losing monetarily. But it's still a requirement, and it has passed legal muster in many states, kind of because of that kind of compensatory part of it. But what you get are mixed income buildings where you don't necessarily know who the low-income tenant is because it's not like they're on a separate floor. They're enjoying the same amenities, and that's really what we want,
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Now, Matthew, I should have started to ask you about your life and how you got involved as an advocate and why this is such an important issue for you. So even though it's not in the beginning of the show, I would like you to tell our audience a little bit about you.
Sure. Well, so let's see. I am now 35. I run the Atlanta Progressive News. I also run Smart Alec, which we, co-founded. I co-founded earlier this year with Dr. DeWanda Farmer and Barbara Payne. And I'm currently a law student. I'm a third-year law student at Lewis and Clark. My interest in all of this really came kind of out of my experience being homeless as a teenager and kind of coming to understand the policy issues, the policy causes and the policy issues around homelessness, especially as you get into adult homelessness, and then seeing the houses moving from homelessness into housing, because the number one cause of homelessness is the lack of affordable housing. So I've been doing this work now for like 20 years. Did kind of a lot of advocacy work, and then running the Atlanta Progressive News, of course, covered a lot of affordable housing issues in Atlanta. Well, as I had these experiences and began to be involved in some of the policy debates that were ongoing policy debates about how to spend federal money, about zoning issues, about how to use surplus property. There's so many policy decisions that have an impact on our housing stock, whether to demolish public housing. I mean, I could go on. And so we finally said, wait a second, I have an idea. And a colleague of mine, who's an advocate down at Atlanta City Hall, Ben Howard. Well, the idea was for something called affordable housing impact statements, which would require the local government to prepare a statement describing the estimated impact, how many units would be added or subtracted at each price point. And this is to help us make better policy decisions at the time that they're being made, and to have long-term accountability, and to really understand, to the extent that we have an unmet need, are we getting closer? Are we getting further away? So we're really excited about that. It was unanimously adopted in the city of Atlanta last year. And within just a very short period of time, it is now pending in Los Angeles, Pittsburgh, New Orleans, and Albany, New York. And and Dr. Farmer and I flew out to New Orleans in June. We met with the New Orleans City Planning Commission. They undertook a series of public hearings and a study of my model bill and unanimously recommended adoption, which we're so excited about. And now we are in the process of developing our next round of model bills, which I'm really excited that we are, really developing the plans for the programming that will really include the voices of low-income people in the development and the creation of these model bills, and that the details will come out of their experience and what their perceived, needs and what the problem is. We have a couple general areas that we're working on, but I can't give you the details yet because the details will come from a grassroots process.
Yeah.
But we're hoping to have a presence at the state capitol in Salem, Oregon. And currently we are doing civic empowerment workshops with homeless people. We've been bringing homeless people down to Multnomah County government to testify. So we are really doing all the things that we're saying we're going to do, all this hard work.
Right.
And Alex, which is that, multi-million-dollar corporation, threatened us with litigation. They threatened to sue us over our name. And
really?
So we received a cease and desist letter from this fancy, DC law firm in June that threatened us and said we had to cease and desist or else we were going to get sued by Alex. And of course, we have no money. I mean, we have a GoFundMe that we've raised like $3,000. So they probably spent more money on the letter than we even had. And we decided not to cease nor to desist. And we actually delivered a bouquet of roses to their office with a card that said, "Thank you for acknowledging us." And so that was on the day that we were supposed to cease and desist, and that was like 3 months ago, and we haven't heard anything from them. So
there you go. They understand.
We think they understand that we're the smart. They can't stop us from being the smart Alex.
Yes. yes. I can hear it. I can hear it. Now, last but not least, I want to talk about HUD. HUD.
Yeah.
I want you to tell our audience, now that is part of the government. It's a organization, Housing and Urban Development. Now, have they worked with you together, and are they trying to help you, or they're not doing anything? What's going on there?
Wow. Well, HUD is just a shadow, a fraction of what it could and should be. And of course that's because of the cuts in funding from the federal government. They have a lot of great programs that, if funded adequately, would work better. They, first of all, they fund our existing remaining public housing stock and our senior high-rises, which keep many of our seniors and disabled people, safe and comfortable. They also do all kinds of grants. They fund all these vouchers. They fund affordable housing through things like CDBG and home. One thing I think that they really need to do, though, is they need to require or strongly incentivize the targeting of these dollars for the families who really need the most help, because we're actually seeing a diversion of federal dollars for so-called affordable units that are priced so that they're really not helping the people who need help.
Yeah.
Another thing that we're interested in is in terms of housing discrimination. We need to go back to the Fair Housing Act and perhaps come up with some new protected classes. Yeah. And some cities are looking at form of payment as a protected class. And what I'm saying is, some people pay with a check, some people pay with a credit card, some people pay with a voucher.
Right.
And if we're really interested in this voucher program, it's not a meaningful choice if no one will take the voucher. We have people walking around Los Angeles and Portland with vouchers that they can't use because no one will take them. So we need to say the form of payment is not a legitimate basis to turn down this renter.
Wow.
There's a lot of things that we could do. There's a lot more, and we're actually hoping that that HUD will do more to what's called affirmatively remove barriers to fair housing.
Right.
And it's kind of going into some of the things that you were talking about, where it's like, you can technically have fair housing, but we still have segregation in our cities.
Exactly. Exactly.
And there's a lot of things that are policy related, and I think that they should encourage the use of these affordable housing impact statements because, all the platitudes in the world are not going to help us meet our goal if we're spending millions of dollars to build new affordable housing, and in the meantime there's a hole in the boat, and everything's just kind of draining out, and we're not doing anything about it.
Yeah.
So, so I think HUD should really reward cities that are serious, that are showing that they're, adopting these innovative tools. They need to get funding preference.
Yes. Now, Matthew, we're at the end of our show, and I always like to have my guests give a last word. So the first thing I want to also ask is, have you written a book or have you done anything that the average person can read so that they can understand what's going on a little more?
I'm actually working on a couple books right now. I'm working on kind of a manifesto about the importance of political participation of low-income people, so stay tuned for that. But come to smartalec.org, so that's smartalec.org. Sign up for our constant contact. Go to our Facebook page. Very active. It's actually more active than the website. And so that's facebook.com/state.municipal.action. We're going to be putting together this national advisory board where, we're really looking for people who care about these issues to be part of coming up with these model bills, because the issues that we face around housing and the environment are so urgent that we can't just keep experimenting around. We need to take the best solutions, put them into forms that are adaptable, and really try to get them replicated, because people are suffering.
Yeah. Well, you are involved in such a wonderful thing. You're trying to help a lot of people who deserve the help. So I want to thank you, Matthew Charles Cardinale, activist, law student, and affordable housing advocate, for being on the Susan Brender Show. I hope that something very positive happens to all the things that you're working on, and I want to thank you again for being on the Susan Brender Show.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Susan Brender Show. To be a guest, email sebrender@yahoo.com.